It's time now for Health Fitness Broadcast with Sherry, a show covering the hottest fitness topics and latest health issues. And now, here's your host, Sherry Horner.
Today we have a special guest, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the show and introduce our guest, Mr. Jim McPartland. He is the man behind the JMAC Performance Group. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And he's an international speaker, author, wellness ambassador, a leader in the fitness industry for the last 20 years. Jim, welcome to the show.
Sherry, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the very kind and generous introduction. I could have listened to you for hours.
I'll repeat it. Now, I do want to pick your brain today because you've done so many things in the fitness industry. Not only the fitness industry, but you've been able to help so many corporations and so many individuals within those corporations. I do want to first talk about your program, the Cross Training for Life system, and if you can kind of give us an idea of how that works.
I'm happy to do that. That system, or the system as you're asking about, is an outcome of spending years trying to get people to exercise or focus on fitness over time, over the bulk of my career of going around the world trying to influence people to exercise through purchasing exercise equipment, getting on programs. It probably was no surprise to anybody who looks at the statistics of obesity and cardiovascular disease that even the most beautiful facilities and the most beautiful equipment hasn't seemed to make a big dent in the health of this country and for that matter, many countries. So over time, I recognized that one of the things that was limiting or impacting folks' time schedules or desire to engage in physical activity really had nothing to do with equipment or facilities. It had to do with belief systems. So the cross-training for life philosophy was sort of an outcome, maybe it was an accident, of recognizing that if I could focus on health as opposed to fitness and deal with things that people were dealing with in their life, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, perhaps help folks deal with the game of life, or maybe equip them better to engage in life, that one of the things they may be more apt to do is to take better care of themselves because they're getting some breakthroughs in other areas of their life.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now I was looking at your website, which is, can you give us your website real quick? So
I can give it to you if you promise to give it back.
Yes.
It's it's my full name, www.James McPartland, James, and McPartland is McPartland, JamesMcPartland.com.
Mm-hmm. Great information, and it kind of explains everything that you have done and that you do. Later in the show, I want to talk about your personal fitness achievements, but I want to talk about the different things that you discuss on the website, and you can tell us how that fits into programs that you do and have done for different groups. You have different, well, it all comes together as a whole once I mention these, but you have the value, the mind, relationship, body, and inspirational. So I want to start with the values and read just a little bit of what it says. It's about understanding on a conscious and unconscious level how certain life events affect us. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, happy to. You know, when I was involved, in a lot of my experience comes from running an operation for about 17 or 18 years. We were manufacturing exercise equipment. I had this belief that if we were in the quote-unquote fitness business, naturally our employees would be exercising. But as it turns out that our percentage of our employee population was no different than the percentage of the overall population engaged in physical activity. Mm-hmm. As I say, coming back to the cross-training for life, I recognize that if I could help equip people to deal with life better, I may have a greater chance of, A, getting them to engage in physical activity, and B, engender loyalty to the cause of what we're trying to do in building our business. So the values question really comes from seeking to find out what people were gifted at, what they really wanted to do with their lives, and try to find a way to blend that with what the potential was of our company. Figuring if I could blend the goals and ambitions of individuals as a driver towards the goals and ambitions of the company, the likely outcome would be tremendous success and victories for many people. The values aspect is a real driver in trying to understand what was most important to our employees and people in general, anybody I talk to. It's rare that I could ask somebody, tell me your top 5 values, or tell me your top 3 values. It isn't something normally that we have top of mind. But what I've learned over time is we have specific values that drive our everyday activities. And when we recognize what those are, we can see things that reinforce the positive nature of those values or violate those values. Or said another way, one of the great causes of stress, I believe, in life is not doing something we know we should be doing. Now, that's something, sometimes that's something that's very clear to us, but often we have stress or anxiety in our life and we can't quite pinpoint what it is. I've come to find more often than not is there's something going on in a person's life that is in conflict with one of their highest values and creates a level of stress.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to ask you, this could go either way, and I'm thinking like a student that doesn't do his or her homework, that can create some stress, but also you're talking about a talent that someone has and they're not using it to their potential, and kind of ignoring that because they have to work that 9-to-5 job to make a living, but yet they do aspire to be a writer or a singer, and that could cause stress too, you think?
Well, precisely. And you know, I will tell you that one thing that engulfs all of us is the 4-letter word that begins with F, and that's fear. Mm-hmm. And we're afraid. And, you know, when I have little children, this is a reminder for me of something I strongly believe. You know, when we're little kids, we have ambitions to do great things in our life, and be it Batman, Superman, the president, an astronaut, some form of ministry work, high aspirations. And unfortunately, for the most part, our education system sort of dulls the ambitions and has us learning to color within the lines and become accepted in social circles. And we hence seek approval of other people. But yet inside of us, we have these ambitions and dreams and goals. The real catalyst for me in seeing where the stress comes from is my parents died at what I will tell you are young ages. My father was 57. My mother was 61. And as their life unfolded, I began to see, and certainly see now that I'm a little bit older, is there was a high level of stress in their life because they were caught up in my father in a job he didn't like, in a lifestyle that wasn't healthy, with stress on the family. There was a lot of anxiety inherent in the operation, if you will, the family I grew up in. And I saw that this stress was created because my father had other things he wanted to do. My mother had great ambitions to be a singer. None of those dreams were ever even touched. And I think no matter what we do, we can't dull the pain of what we're truly gifted at to do. Mm-hmm. I spend time trying to help people unwrap those gifts, because that's the game. If you can find a way to unwrap those gifts and give them away, you can find an amazing outcome or fulfillment in life.
I like that. Now, you mentioned that unwrap those gifts. Before we let you go, I do want to talk about your book in just a moment, the book coming out, The Unopened Gifts. So we'll get to that, but I want to ask about some other things on your website that's involved in your program, the mind. And one thing that was written there says, experience life based on how we are, not how life is. So what do you say about that?
Well, you know, one would have to question each of us every day is, you know, what's our version of reality? And I believe we don't see life as it is. We see life as we are. And if we hold, as I said, we're conditioned when we're little kids to adapt and adopt the beliefs of our parents and coaches and teachers. And let's say we live the first 10 or 12 or 14 years with our tape recorders on, if people still use tape recorders as an example. And then at some point in time, we go from record and we hit play, and we just play back. And what I've learned is that many of us have beliefs that no longer serve us. Maybe we're not conscious of that, but we look for things in life that validate our beliefs. Mm-hmm. And we more often want to be right than anything else. And sometimes the things we fight for may not actually serve us, but yet we want to be right.
Right. I understand that one. Right. What about relationships? I want to read this real quick because this is so true. I mean, everything that you teach is true, but this really hits home in especially the fitness industry, how I say, back in the old days, the fitness center was called the spa, but now it's where you go get a massage and a facial. But the fitness center used to be called the spa, and we had a saying, the spa world is a small world, because once you're in the fitness industry, you kind of know everybody. And but it says relationships, we all have been given gifts, and this goes back to the gift thing, and to share those in service to others is one of the most powerful tools for cultivating friendships and associations. Can you elaborate on that?
I'd be happy to. I can use it in the perspective of let's call it the health and fitness industry, but I think it applies to the planet.
Mm-hmm.
You look at it this way. I think we all think in pictures, and I'll come back to children and adults here as an example. So the average child of 4 laughs or smiles or shows his or her teeth an average of 400 times a day. When that child turns 40, that number drops to 4.
Mm-hmm.
We become very serious, very internally focused. And what I think is a very interesting dynamic as it comes to relationships, and I can use the health and fitness industry as an example. I recently wrote a blog for Athletic Business that created a little bit of a stir. And I've been a member of a well-known health and fitness club in Orange County, California for over 20 years. And about 7 or 8 weeks ago, I had my first experience where someone made eye contact with me and had a conversation. Now, I have to tell you, I was skeptical because I hadn't had that experience before. And yet, every time I walk into a facility, my thinking is, how many retailers would give an arm and a leg to have somebody come into their store 3 or 4 times a week? I ought to get to know that person better. Nobody knew me. And had they known me, even in spite of that, I have brought business. I brought people to the restaurant. I've helped them rent meeting rooms because I thought it was convenient. Yet, when this guy paid some attention to me, after my skepticism wore off, I actually found that I was doing things to go out of my way to help him. He was a personal trainer, find new clients. And at the end of the day, that guy, by coming forward and making eye contact and being sincere, changed the paradigm of how I viewed this facility. And people are scared as enough as it is, and everybody wants to go back to the bar or the story Cheers. Everybody wants to go where somebody knows your name,
mm-hmm.
right? At least the North American terminology being we have 2 names, a first name and a last name. Our favorite words are our name.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of relationships, people want to know that you have a legitimate interest in them,
right,
and don't have an agenda to get across. And the service aspect of it, like I saw in this gentleman, reinforces that, because by him attempting to serve whatever my needs were as he got to know me a little bit, I found myself going out of my way to help him.
Right. Givers or receivers, no matter what you're giving. If you are a giving person and you give of your time and your passion, your energy, and your love, givers or receivers. What about the body? Now, on your website, it says how we handle the body has a correlating effect on how we arrive at the end of our journey. So explain that one. I kind of think I know what it means.
Well,
you don't take care of your health, you're going to die.
It's unfortunate, but if you have paid, as most people have, a lot of attention to the recent hubbub in politics about the healthcare bill and healthcare legislation and changing it, there's seldom vigorous discussion around prevention. There is a lot of discussion around who owes who what and who's going to pay for it after the fact. And I think life is a lot about personal responsibility, taking 100% of our 100% responsibility for who we are and how we show up. I mean, the studies are consistent through the years, whether it's 70 or 75%, and some people say 80% of the quality of your life and your health is lifestyle. The balance is genetics. And I think it's pretty fair to say, statistically, as a population, and this happens now all over the world, we can tend to treat our bodies like woodsheds, and maybe not intentionally trying to harm ourselves. But, if one is responsible, you recognize that we end up where we are by the choices that we make.
Mm-hmm. One more I want to ask you before we move on, because I have to tell everybody about your remarkable accomplishments. What about inspirational? How do you tap into that?
and everybody's got something that's really important to them. If you can get the layers of often, let's say, wet blankets off of dreams, or another visual might be try to find the log that's clogged the river of inspiration for people. If you spend enough time with people and they trust you, whether that's in group form or individually, and you ask people to really focus on what do you want in life, and not from a selfish perspective, but you have a life assignment, you have a mission, there's a purpose, there's a reason you're here. What do you want? What comes to your heart? What comes to your mind? And unfortunately, if you look at, the numbers of people reliant on government subsidy or reliant on paycheck-to-paycheck living, it's difficult to get people to spend time thinking deeply about life. And that's because, hey, life is busy. Everybody's busy. And what I seek to do with folks that I have a good fortune to work with, whether that's CEO work or management teams, is I ask 3 questions. What do you want? Why do you want it? And I believe if anybody will do anything that is physically, mentally, emotionally possible if they have a strong enough why. And the how is not so important. As a matter of fact, I believe if you know how you're going to do it, your dream and goal may not be big enough. So the 3 questions I ask: what do you want? Why do you want it? And we'll work together on the how.
Yeah, I like that. I agree. Okay, so I just want to let everyone know that Jim has so much experience, and he's been not only in the fitness industry, but he's been around the world with his keynote speaking, his seminars and workshops. And first, I want to say where he's been: China, Israel, Australia, Russia, Italy, Mexico, and throughout the U.S. So where are you going next, Jim? That's what I want to know.
Well, I'm right here with you right now. After that, I, like many people, will be in the beautiful Bay Area next week of San Francisco at that large conference known as URSA. And then I have some work coming up in Europe and in Asia throughout the year, doing the work that you've been asking me about here, which I very much appreciate your questions. And probably what's interesting about it is, while there are cultural differences and demographics and languages, some of the things that we've discussed here from the tools perspective, I have found apply across the board. So yes. San Francisco, there's a trip to Europe, and then some time in Asia. So if you're not busy, you can come help me.
Yes. That sounds good. What about if you can touch on potential just overall, because it's a lot of people just don't even get close to what they're potentially capable of doing.
And listen, that's a great question. And I'll say the driver for me, as I mentioned, the loss of my mother and my father. And when I was growing up, I thought what would make my dad happy, to have him demonstrate love to me, which is something many sons seek from their fathers. Certainly was true in my case. Is that if I excelled in sports or if I excelled in business or both, that would make my father proud. And I worked very hard at both. And I don't know that ever connected the dots with him. As I say, he died early. But, I look at life as we've all been gifted to do certain things. And you can hear the sirens going off. So
You're not having a heart attack, are you? I know that, some people, it's stressful to talk to me. So if you...
No, I think what's
you didn't call 911 saying, hey, please help me get away from this girl. I need
This is like a game show. I think you hit on the most critical question here. Those are the sirens going off. I think if I get this right, I win the washer and dryer.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what's going on here. But, here's what I think could be, a depiction. I'll give you my vision of potential, and I call it gifts. So one of my great fears, and I mentioned we all have fears, is that I'll come to the end of my days, and I've already decided to live to 101. I've got board approval. The documents are clear. It's already set with the angels.
Yes.
And
I'm there with you.
All right, we'll work with the team. And, after I pass the earth, I will have the good fortune of still being in body for a while as I'm sort of looked over. And one of the pictures I have in my mind that's a driver for me is I'm laying on a table, so to speak, bright lights. I open my eyes. I'm putting my chin to my chest. I look around, and I can see those angel wings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the proverbial questions. All right, McPartland, you gave you some gifts. What were they and what did you do with them? And one great visual / fear for me is that I put my chin to my chest, I look down at my body, and I see several boxes still wrapped.
Yeah.
And I reinforce that by the fact that for a long time I spent a lot of time trying to find affirmation and approval from my father and from other people by virtue of some of my experiences, and you might call them accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned that there's still some stuff inside of me that's a driver for the things that you've asked about here that are on my website that say one of my reasons on earth, or I call it my life sentence, is to help people pull their potential out and have the courage to use it so that maybe they don't end up like my father or my mother, or that they come to the end of their days and don't have what I would view as a great regret. And regret not being at what we did, but what we didn't do. And I've spent enough time with folks that are 70, 80, 90, and close to 100 and said, I don't know why I was so concerned about what other people would think, because they weren't really thinking of me. They were thinking of themselves, and I wish I would have done blank.
Right.
And that's a pretty common theme. And so I try to get to folks as, I try to exemplify what it takes to face fears and fall on your head and do a few things, and hopefully give some folks the courage to do the same, because, really, instinctively if you're doing what you're gifted to do.
Right, exactly. Wow, you're so great, because I can totally see those people that you're motivating, and I'm on the same side of the fence that you are. I don't want to be 97 and say, darn, I should have wrote that book. I always wanted to, never did, but I want to have written that book and many more. Speaking of books, I want to save that for last, but going back to the potential, now your potential, 38 marathons and 8 Ironman triathlons. Wow. You did that in one lifetime. That was in one lifetime?
And that just means I have a high threshold for pain.
Yeah. But that, again, reaching your potential more than once, that's a good example, too. My hat goes off to anybody who's ran a marathon, and especially done a triathlon. That's just amazing. And I've interviewed several people who have done the Ironman, and once you've done it, it's like, wow, I really did that. Okay, now let me do it again. So it's amazing, pretty amazing. So how did you train for that? I mean, did you say, okay, I'm going to run a marathon, or did you just start running for your health and for the love of it, and then next thing you know, you're running marathons?
Yeah, it wasn't Forrest Gump like, but it was the recognition or the belief early on that I again come back to my mother and my father, that what took their lives early was the fact that they weren't healthy or fit or exercising. That was a contributing factor, but it wasn't as large as I one time viewed it. Hence, having that belief early on, I thought, listen, I'm going to prevent myself from having that outcome or leaving the earth early, and I'm going to be vigorous in my pursuit of exercise. I guess you'd say I have a type A personality, so my view of what that meant was, long distance stuff or great T-shirts from great events. And what those experiences have taught me is that, if you can do those things, and I still do those things as a way of enjoyment and testing myself and seeing how well I can do as I get older. But one of the things I have learned is it's really not that important in the grand scheme of things. It's a reference point, and people are kind enough to acknowledge it, and I'm really grateful. But the more compelling story is I've met folks who are 80 and 90 doing marathons. I was on this quest one year in a crazy bet to run a marathon a month until the first individual fell out.
Is that a bet you made with your friends?
I guess you'd say they're friends.
Yeah, are they still friends?
they're still friends, and that went over a year. Mm-hmm. And people say, "Wow, you ran over 12 marathons in a year." But halfway through that journey, I came across an individual who was, I think it was in Berlin, Germany, and I'm running, thinking, "All right, boy, I'm 6 marathons into the year. I'm special." This individual runs up beside me. He's got a British accent. And so I think, I can have a conversation because I don't speak German. And he's not in a very happy mood. And I try to run with him. He's a bit faster. I'm asking about, what's your time, doing anything to take my mind off the pain. And the reason he's in a bad mood is he's not going to do so well today. And it was, 3 hours and 20 minutes he was focused on, which to me is very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason he was disappointed was because the day before, yesterday, in England, he had run a 3:05.
Oh, wow.
And I look around, and there are the 3 hours and 5 minutes. I look around, there's cameramen, and there's sort of this motorized cart following us, and I learned by talking to him and some people around him is he was out to set the Guinness Book of World Records for marathons in a year, and that's 112.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
so that shrivels up the number you gave of me. And even if you come back to the Ironman, I've seen people who have. I was in an event a year and a half ago where a double above the knee amputee was the first to complete an Ironman, where the man with no lung, a woman with no arm, a nun who's 82 years old. It all comes back to our belief systems and what we think we are capable of because it's in our head, so much of it. So I think that those events reinforce for me that it's the muscle of my mind is probably one of the most important things to continue to exercise.
Yes, absolutely. And I know there's so many people out there, and as professionals in the fitness industry, I'm sure everyone can relate. You've talked to so many clients or potential clients that say, "Oh, I could never do that," whatever it is, whether it's serious resistance training or running or taking a kickboxing class or spinning or whatever it is. There's always someone who initially says, "Oh, I could never do that. I could never do what they're doing in that room in there. I could never do what he's doing over there." And they kind of limit their potential by saying that. So, of course, as professionals, we have to say, no, scratch that. Rewind. Yes, you can. Yes, you will. So, but wow, you're such a great inspiration. Now, let me go to your book. Tell us about the book, The Unopened Gifts.
Listen, I'm happy to. Well, maybe like many of us, I've said for a long time, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a book. And I think a number of people just said, all right, either you will or you won't, we don't hear it anymore. And so it has been a lot harder than, to do it is a lot harder to say it. And I think one of the lessons that continues to get reinforced to me is people hear what they see. And if you capture that, people hear what they see. It's all about your actions. Mm-hmm. And so I finally said, all right, enough of me making these promises. I've got to have a meeting with myself. And I decided to write a book. And I felt, maybe given the amount of books available and how they're available now, while you've been very kind and generous with your acclaim and praise here for me, and I really do appreciate that. In the grand scheme of things, there are lots of well-known folks out there with books on shelves. So rather than write sort of a how-to book on all the things we talked about, I decided to go down the path of a novel or a fable. And I've written a story that, quite honestly, is loosely associated with the life of yours truly. And it's about an individual in pursuit of the brass ring who does not see all the great things he has in his life, the great gifts that are already around him, that he comes very close to losing it all. And what I hope comes from it for those that read the book, and I'd be excited by anybody who reads the book, is that they would pull from the story, this man, his family, his business, his employees, his children, his lifestyle, things that would apply to them wherever they are in their life at the moment, and pull inspiration from that, or a way to shift the paradigm of how they see things by being involved with the characters and relating to their own life of ways that they can get different outcomes, and most importantly, recognize what they already have in their life. Or put another way is, and I've learned this, and most of this, as we'd say, semi-wisdom comes from personal experience, and most of that comes from setbacks. It's the things that we learn that go wrong that help us often see the things that go right, but it doesn't require in life a hard right-hand turn of changing jobs and changing relationships and marriages and all that stuff. It's reshifting how we see things today and doing the best we have with what we have at the moment that can lead to amazing outcomes.
Yes, good tip. And I was going to ask you for a tip, but that pretty much sums it up. And so does our time limit. But I want to thank you so much. And I want to give out your website again, jamesmcpartland.com. Check him out. And I want to thank you for all this great information and inspiration that we can, and motivation that we can use toward our potential. that we have. So thank you so much for joining us, Jim McPartland. It was great.
The pleasure was mine. The pleasure was mine. You're doing a great service to the industry. I'm honored to have been your guest. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Jim.
As we say goodbye, I'd like to remind you to take some time to relax, to reflect back on the success of your day. Enjoy that good, positive feeling of knowing you're doing everything you can to take care of your health.